Can you go upstairs? Yeah, there's one chair over there. I can go back home. Oh, yeah. I'm trying not to stand.
I get it,
Yeah.
You're right next to my microphone.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see if we have anyone on the line. Not yet, but you never know. So we'll keep streaming. So thanks everyone for coming. My name is Frank Reeves. I'm the Entrepreneurship Manager here at the Collider. Just give you all a little overview, so I won't go through that. But if you do have any other questions about the Collider or interested in becoming involved, we are a membership organization. We also have lots of volunteer opportunities, and we have newsletters too that just kind of provide information on what we're up to and what's going on in the region. So if you're interested in any of that, please don't hesitate to talk to me afterwards. Really excited to have Laura here today. She's part of this Climate Indicators Working Group. So I'm really excited personally to just learn about that process of taking information and understanding what's happening climatically and then translating that into decision making and action. So that's what she'll be talking about. And without further ado, I'll pass it off to Laura. Yeah, thanks so much for coming.
Hi everyone. Good to see you on this nice thing. So my name is Laura Stevens. I'm with NC State University. More specifically, the Cooperative Institute for Climate and Science in Carolina. So we're a research institution that's part of NC State, and we work closely with NOAA and the federal sector, the National Center for Information. I just got a shout out here to my colleagues, Geek Aunt and Jessica Blunden. Jessica's at the back of the room here. They also work on the Indicators Project. Geek is the working group co-chair, and Jessica is in a coordination role. So just a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. First, we'll start with what an indicator actually is. And then I'll describe the US GCRP, that's the US Global Change Research Program, our indicators platform that has been created. How we develop an indicator, what makes a good climate change indicator, and who actually uses them, and where we can go forward. So we'll jump right in. What is an indicator? AJ. So we state in our little fact sheet that I've brought some of this today, an indicator is an observational calculation that can be used to track climate conditions and trends. So that's the very basic level of what you might describe it as. And indicators are used to advance the scientific understanding, help people understand simply how the climate is changing, and communicate that information to the general audience. They're very, very useful in informing decision making, being able to assess climate change risks and vulnerabilities, and ultimately help people adapt to changing climate and become climate resilient. Climate indicators can be physical in nature, so pure climate science like changing temperatures, change in heavy precipitation, things like that. The one on the screen is carbon dioxide concentration, something I'm sure everyone's familiar with. But they could also be societal, ecological in nature. We can go on to look at climate impacts as well as the pure physical climate. So this one is probably the most simple of all the climate indicators, just a simple time series of how carbon dioxide is changing over time. So an indicator is a graphic, usually, always, actually, but it's not the same as a data visualization tool. Because indicators are constantly being updated. We have to keep them relevant. So we update them on an annual basis or more often if we can. And they're comparative to a baseline, meaning that we're always looking at a trend over time because we're interested in how the climate is changing. They consist of a chart or a map or some kind of graphic, and they can be varying levels of complexity. So the first one I showed was a very simple time series. This one is our ocean chlorophyll concentration indicator. So this one is a map piece combined with a series of bar charts, trend lines, and additional information. So depending on your audience or what the metric is that you're trying to show, you might need different levels of complexity to get that information. So what kind of climate change indicator sets exist? So we have our US GCRP indicator platform that's hosted on globalchange.gov. I'm going to be talking a lot more about that today. But there are others out there. We're not the only ones that produce a set of climate indicators. The EPA has their climate change indicators portal online, and they produced a PDF report in 2016 as well. NASA, the Vital Signs of the Planet. This is a set of indicators as well that you can view online. Climate.gov, they have a global climate dashboard where you can, that one's interactive, you can click and look at changes in temperature and carbon dioxide and all these other metrics. And there are many others, these aren't the only ones. An indicator isn't unique to one group. Anyone or everyone can look at the time series of changing temperatures, and we will present it in our own way. There's probably many other indicator sets out there that I haven't even heard. So a little bit about the US Global Change Research Program. It's consisted of 13 federal agencies that are conducting research on global change and the impacts on society. And the US GCRP was established along with the Global Change Research Act of 1990. So this is something mandated by law, and it was established by President Bush initially. So what the Global Change Research Act states is that we have a requirement to understand, assess, and predict global climate change, both human-induced and natural variabilities. And the US Global Change Research Program oversees the Indicators Project and a whole bunch of other stuff that comes under that umbrella, including the National Climate Assessment, which is something else that I personally work on. So we produce our National Climate Assessment reports every 4 years, and that's actually mandated by law that we do that. You can see the agencies down the side there. NOAA comes under the Department of Commerce, but there's also EPA, NASA, anyone else involved in global change research. Under the US GCRP, we have our interagency working groups. So these bring the agencies together through a series of coordinated activities in order to implement the global change research that they're doing, working together to identify gaps and fill the needs of the global change community. So we have the indicators interagency working group highlighted in red, that's the one we work under. But the other ones in bold are closely associated with Climate Change and Human Health Group, Social Science Coordinating Committee, the Sustained Assessment Working Group, really closely with the National Climate Assessment, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And then there's all these others too, which we work with. This is all overseen by somebody called the Subcommittee on Global Change Research, and then they meet once a year with an all working group meeting as well. So what does the Indicators Working Group specifically do? Well, as I said, we're an interagency effort, so all the 13 agencies are involved. We're working to provide this indicators platform. So what we want to do is highlight our data, our agency research, and all our existing indicator efforts. So we present our current suite of indicators on the platform. And we're really providing accessible, easy to understand, and well-documented climate data for general audience. We're also helping the US Global Change Research Program with their sustained assessment activities. So in between our quadrennial national climate assessment reports, there's continued assessment activity that goes on, so we help support that. And this little diagram shows a little bit about the sustained assessment process. We start with the foundational science, which helps inform research, which helps produce our reports, and that goes back around to help inform climate decisions. And the indicators component is integral in that process. So as we're so closely tied with the National Climate Assessment, who have a very high level of rigor in their content in their reports, we really aim to produce assessment grade indicators. So these indicators need to be transparent, meaning people can understand how we got from A to B to Z, all the way through how it was created, what is involved in it, what are the data, what are the methods. Need to be reproducible. Scientific integrity is important. We use high quality, like federal data sets, but they also need to be relevant and timely and appropriate for the audience. So I'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. We're looking to expand our indicators to be more regionally relevant. That's what we get a lot of requests for, is regional, local climate information in order for people to be able to make informed decisions at the local level. And we might look to improve the interactivity of our graphics online as well, which helps people understand what's going on. We do have an indicator fact sheet. I brought a few of those today, so we can take one at the end if anyone's interested in exploring more or passing on to a colleague. So what we actually do here in Asheville, the National Center for Environmental Information has a small amount of funding from NOAA to help us produce this indicator set, help the indicator operations, and improve the current portal that we have. Beek just joined us. He's the Indicators Working Group co-chair. Beek and Jessica are from NCEI's Climate Monitoring Branch. So they bring a huge amount of expertise in that relevant and timeliness aspect of it, because they're constantly doing like monitoring activities of the climate and producing reports and spreading that information. I myself work with the National Climate Assessment Technical Support Unit. So myself and others bring expertise in the scientific integrity of the data, the climate science behind it, and being able to share that on the web. We have web expertise, we have the data expertise behind it all. And then we also partner with NEMAC, who Jim's part of. Ian Johnson is the guy at NEMAC who's been helping us create our publication quality graphics. So we're very thankful for them as well. So this is what the indicator platform actually looks like. It's globalchange.gov/browse/indicators. You can go to globalchange.gov and you'll find it from the bar at the top there. So we have our homepage. This is the landing page. It tells you a little bit about what the indicator platform is, what we're trying to accomplish, and why indicators are important. And then if you scroll down, you can explore the indicators themselves. We have 16 indicators online right now that we're expanding. And then we have federal climate-related indicator links. So there's a link to the NOAA State of the Climate, the National Vital Signs, other related indicator activities. This is what our indicators catalog looks like right now. So if you click through, our 16 indicators are presented in a thumbnail format. Ultimately, as we expand, we'll probably categorize them on the page. So we'll have indicators, temperature-related indicators, that kind of thing. And then we also highlight the 12 component indicator figure that was used in the National Climate Assessment. So this one is an interactive graphic. You can click on it. You can see trends in wildfire, temperature, heat wave, precipitation. So we highlight that up front and center. Of the hundreds of national figures in the 4th National Climate Assessment, this figure was downloaded out of all of those. So there's definitely some interest in the indicators themselves. So we feature that on our portal and ultimately aim to integrate all 12 of those into our set. We already have a couple. These are the 16 indicators that we have, sort of loosely categorized by color. And we have greenhouse gases, we have temperature indicators, ocean-related indicators, phenology, and we're venturing into the impact realm. Our latest one is the $1 billion disasters indicator, which Beek and his team helped us with. So that uses NOAA's $1 billion disaster data set, and we present it in our portal as well. So when you click on an indicator, this is what you see. This is the example of the $1 billion disasters page. We have a banner up front that briefly describes what it is, the date range that the indicator spans, and who contributed to it. In this case, it was created by NOAA with data from FEMA and USDA as well. Below, we have a little intro paragraph about what the indicator is showing. And then we show the graphic itself. Obviously, that's the key component of the indicator. In this case, it's a time series bar chart of billion-dollar weather and climate disasters by category. I'm interested to see what 2018 is going to add to this. This one goes up through 2017. And you have options to download the image and caption below. Then, if you scroll down, we have even more descriptive text that goes into detail about how the indicator was created. And this part that you can mostly see on the side there is a little box that says why it's important. So this is actually my favorite part of the page. We just did a website redesign recently and we added this. I think it's key to understanding the indicator to tell people why it's important. So if you're only going to look at two things on the page, look at the graphic and look at that little box. Then at the bottom we have related resources. So in this case, you can go back down to where the data came from. You can click on the link there to see the NOAA data behind the graphic. Or you can also go forward to see where else these data have been used. In this case, a similar figure was included in the forecast climate assessment. So when we create an indicator, there's four key components to it: the data behind it, the visualization itself, which is obviously the chart or map, and sometimes we have an interactive version. So in this case, this is a time series of how the length of the frost-free season in the United States is changing. It's increasing over time compared to the long-term average rate. You can actually click that button. It brings up a little visualization window, and you can pick and choose which dates you want to see the information for. We have the description, the textual description, and then we also have what we call metadata behind it. So metadata is simply data behind the data. So how was this figure created? So if you click that little button, you'll get information on what data sets were used, who created it, and how they created it. So that's all very important for us to share that information so it's fully transparent in the entire process. So to create an indicator is a very rigorous process. We don't just grab some data and throw it online. We have a lot of steps to go through. So the initial stage is the proposal stage. An indicator is proposed to the working group and we assign a champion. So that's one of the working group members. Then they will fill out a template similar to this, where you can't actually read it, but this states what the measure is, who's responsible for it, the temporal and spatial resolution, what data are being used. It even has what the limitations of the indicator are. So that's submitted to the working group and reviewed and approved. Then we actually create the figure itself. The indicator champion sends the data to Jessica and I, and we'll create a figure, and then we work with DMAC to make a publication quality graphic on it. That goes back to the working group, often goes through many revisions before we get it just right. Then we have to create the additional components. The indicator champion and the working group work together to write a description for the web. And we also collect all the metadata. So there's a very extensive spreadsheet that we send out to the person creating the indicator, and they can tell us all about what went into creating it. We can provide that information. And this whole process takes a series of months to go through. Then we deploy it online. We work with the US UCRP web team to deploy it, and then we'll do some social media posts when it's fully. So what actually makes a good indicator? We don't want to put these out there and it's too confusing for everyone and no one can use it or they don't understand it. So these are climate change indicators. So we really want climate relevant content, a clear relationship to a changing climate. That's quite obvious when you look at the physical climate indicators, but as we move forward into impact, adaptation, we need to keep that link to climate obvious and upfront. Is to fill a gap in our knowledge. We also want to link to related resources so people understand where it's coming from. Needs to be understandable, a fairly simple metric in most cases, but like I said before, it depends on the audience and on what we're looking at. But we need to make sure that the changes over time are easy to interpret and obvious people. So this is one of the indicators we created last year. This is the heat wave characteristics of the United States. The data that came to us initially had 4 components. We had heat wave frequency, season length, intensity, and duration. So that's too much information to present in an indicator format. So we cut it down to just the 2, frequency and heat wave season length. And we sort of went back and forth on whether we should present a temporal time series or a spatial map. Both have their pros and cons. What you lose from one, you gain with the other. So we decided to do both. NEMAC helps us create this 4-panel figure so you can see how heat waves are changing over time and how they differ throughout the United States. And this has been a very popular indicator. I really like it. Like I said, it depends on your audience. These are 2 examples of a set of indicators. So one on the left is from the Climate Science Special Report, which is part of the climate assessment, the National Climate Assessment, Volume 1 of the 4th assessment. And that's a more technical document. The audience for that is primarily scientists. So here we show multiple time series for each metric. I know you can't tell what they are, but there's temperature, sea surface temperature, sea level. We show multiple time series on the same plot. It's very technical presentation, but that's what's right for that audience. When we do something like our USGCRP indicator suite, we want to make it easily understandable. So you've seen the graphics I've already shown, and this is the version of the indicators graphic that's in the forecast climate. So here we have an infographic, which is easy for people to digest, and we have different presentations of maps and charts, and it's a lot more simple. So as I mentioned before, we really want to make the content relatable to people. It needs to cover a relevant geographic area. So if we're simply looking at the change in temperature over time, annually, we can present temperature for the globe or for the continental states. But if we're looking at, say, number of days over 100, probably want that to be more regional information, because that's going to be more impactful for someone who lives in Vermont, for someone who lives in Phoenix, where it's always 100 degrees quite a lot of the time. So that's important to note. And we want to keep the information regularly updated and relevant. So every year, Jessica and I are going to go through our entire set and add one more year on to each of our charts and update everything. And we really want the information to be trustworthy. We need scientific integrity behind it. So we use reliable, federally sourced data. We make sure everything's transparent and reproducible and scientifically vetted. So it goes through a whole bunch of review with the working group. And one part I actually didn't mention on the previous set of slides was that we try to do an external review at the end of the whole process. So someone outside the working group looks over our new indicator and approves it also. Oops. A bit more about scientific integrity. Metadata, it's more than just the big picture. Transparency and reproducibility really are key. And we leverage our National Climate Assessment expertise and our peers for that. And we have the high level of rigor all the way from the initial proposal to putting it online. And as I mentioned, every step is approved by the working group. And as this says, metadata is a love note to the future. We don't want to be updating these a few years down the line and forget what we did. So it's important for ourselves to just track what went into each indicator. To do that, we use metadata management tools. We borrow this from the National Climate Assessment. There's a whole back-end system for every single figure in the assessment to log the metadata. So we use that. We're grateful that we can share that. And then we have an online metadata viewer. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the National Climate Assessment website, but if you go under the NCA 4 pages, find a figure that you like, click on the little eyeball symbol above, and this will pop up, and this helps you delve into the data that went behind the figure. You can see the full record of what went into it, all the analysis tools, even down to the software that was used. So we're hoping to implement that on the indicators portal as well, so we have full transparency. With the National Climate Assessment, that's mandated. It's something called the Information Quality Act. It's not mandated for us, but why not do it? Go ahead and implement that, hopefully this spring. We're looking to maintain our indicators on an annual basis, keep up-to-date data and metadata, And we're so closely linked with the National Climate Assessment that we're gradually updating everything to their style and their language. This is one we updated. We added a couple of years of data to it. We changed the fonts, we changed the layout, just to be consistent across our brand. We're always looking to expand our set of indicators. We want to venture outside the pure climate science realm, expand more into climate change impacts, measures of vulnerability or resilience, adaptation efforts. This isn't my area of expertise. I'm hoping maybe at the end we can have a discussion on this, because this is where we're looking to improve the set. The question is, how much effort do we focus on sort of padding out our climate science indicators before we move on to impacts? That's something the working group has talked about. Also, I talked about making things climate relevant. Ultimately, we might have an indicator on heat-related deaths or something like exposure to the Zika virus. You've got to relate that back to climate. So we're looking at ways to integrate our different indicators together. So you might have an indicator on temperature, that moves on to looking at heat waves, that moves on to looking at heat-related deaths. They're all entwined, they're all linked. So maybe one day we'll redesign our site so that it all fits together like that. Other improvements to our indicators platform, we really want to tie in with the 4th and 5th National Climate Assessment. We're already talking about NCA 5. So we're looking through the National Climate Assessment report to see what figures in there can become indicators, and we're looking to create new indicators that the NCA 5 authors can use in the report. We want to improve our relationship with the NCA authors for that purpose, and also broaden the diversity of our working group. There's 13 federal agencies in US GRP. We currently have people on the working group from NOAA, EPA, USDA, but we don't have all 13. So we really want to make links with everyone else and broaden our scope. We're always improving our website too. If we can improve our interactive graphics, I think that would be good. Implement the metadata viewer from the National Climate Assessment and improve the navigation. So here's the part you all came for, right? Who can use a climate change indicator? Well, literally anyone can use it. You've probably all used it already, you just don't realize it. Even viewing a graphic and taking in the information, that's using a climate change indicator. We're communicating very complex scientific information, but to a broad audience. So we really got to do a lot of things in a small scope. So decision makers, policy makers, who need to inform decisions at multiple scales, we got to feed all their needs. Fellow scientists and report authors. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is educators. These are the simple presentation of our graphics is very good for education. Students in the classroom can use these. And then just the public in general. There's a lot of people who can use a climate change indicator in their life. So, and then looking ahead, how can we measure the impact online, but we're not really sure who's using them. I mentioned that the indicator graphic in the 4th National Climate Assessment is the most downloaded indicator out of all the figures. And we know someone's interested in it. But how can we actually figure out who's using it and for what? I think we need to improve our communication. Our social media is lacking a little bit. So we're looking into that for sure. And linking the indicators to tools to enable effective decision making. So how can we get this information into the hands of people who need to make impactful climate decisions? And then looking at ecological and societal impacts, better links to the adaptation community, all that kind of thing. Like I said, this isn't my area of expertise. I'm a meteorologist by trade, and I help create the indicators, but going ahead and getting them in the hands of people to actually use them, that's what I'm really interested to learn. So I'm hoping that we can have a discussion on that. Thank you for listening. I've got the fact sheets here. We'll take one at the end, but yeah, let's talk.
Yeah,
Back on this.
I know this is US level change.
Yeah.
But is somebody looking at what other places are doing and what indicators they're using as well? Like in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, or in Europe, the same kind of markers that we have here, because it lends your credibility if other people are seeing the same thing there, and you can publish that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I'm sort of US based. I'm from England, but I work on the National Climate Assessment, and then the USDCRP is all federal. But yeah, obviously the IPCC report has authors from all around the globe.
The what report?
The IPCC, the big
What is IP?
Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change.
Okay.
So they produce their big report every few years, and that contains a lot of figures about global climate, which would be, a lot of them would be considered indicators. So yeah, we're seeing the same kind of trends all around the world. I'm not sure about specifically if there's an Australian set of indicators or a British set. Definitely would be good to know.
But like you showed a map of chlorophyll, or
Yeah, ocean chlorophyll.
in the oceans.
Yeah.
That looks like a worldwide.
Yeah, so we just show North America, but we have the data for the entire.
Okay.
So our data comes from in situ, actual observations, as well as like satellite and remote sense data. So that one is satellite data set. And NCEI has all that information globally. Just we're focused on the US, so that's what we present. Yeah, we do have all that. Yeah.
You talked about increasing the number of indicators, but I can imagine there's an extreme. So if you had 5,000, 10,000, too many indicators to comprehend.
Yeah. So
what do you see as the sweet spot there for increasing to still add value to the indicators, but not having too many that adds another layer of complexity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that's something that the working group is struggling with right now. So like we're still sort of ramping up the project. It's been going for a few years, but it's very exciting right now. Like, let's add this one, let's add that one, let's add that one. And our expertise is in the physical climate realm. So I sort of mentioned this, like when do we stop adding to the physical climate set and expand to the impacts and adaptation? And yeah, and how many is too many?
Well, the thing is, from my perspective, anyway, that you have the ones that apply to everybody, the national ones, but some of the more important ones are if you can point to an indicator locally or regionally,
yeah,
then people will identify more with it. Such and such a species is dying out, and it's been shown that it's correlated with climate change. Then you get somebody's attention locally, which it may not, nobody elsewhere would maybe have any interest in that item. So
right, yeah.
it changes the focus a little bit.
So our scope is quite broad. We're looking to do that, but how can we actually interpret that without spending 2 years creating one indicator for the entire country? So one thing we're doing in linking up with the National Climate Assessment is providing information to authors and letting authors know what information is available. So we might have an indicator for the US, but they will know that they can come to us for their chapter in the Northeast US and get that regionally relevant information and present it in their own. So what we need to do is communicate that this regional information is available, even if it's not explicit on our site. Yes.
Okay, look, I just moved back and I spent 8 years as a technical commentator, and I never did this stuff, so it hasn't made it there. But I'm thinking if you can do it by state, that's how every speech we read up was. This is what's happening in our state. You could also break it down.
Right.
Just like if you have a Korean region of every speech, the statistic we use is how they affecting people in the state.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think when we can develop our interactive graphics, we don't want to show a 50-pound figure.
No,
But if we have a map and we could break it down, and we could, yeah, definitely. Yeah, we have state climate summaries that's part of the sustained climate assessment process. Yeah, I actually worked on those. But it's sort of high-level information on temperature, precipitation changes. It's just a 4-page fact sheet for each state.
This is how much damage.
Right, yeah, we didn't go into the impacts in those.
time. I'm hoping we can support some of that.
Our governor is testifying more about the border infections and some of this information.
No, good.
That's all this discussion is sort of part of the examples, it seems to me, of this key question at the top here: how can we measure the impact of our indicators? In an earlier slide, you had said who can use them? Anyone can. It's to me that a key question is, so who does?
Mhm.
Who is your target audience? And is there a way to track and enhance opportunities for policymakers and educators to use the information? And I think you said this really wasn't your area,
Right.
but that's the big question to me. It seems of practical relevancy. All of this exercise.
Yeah.
It's great stuff, and it's nice to see it. It's key to make it all understandable. But how do you translate that into? So let's make that part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, exactly.
Are measures being? How can we measure? Has anyone started to answer that question?
I can give one specific example. We can look at West Palm Beach, and so this is, again, a local small business here, but doing a resilience assessment. So when we walked in a year ago, mayor and city council, we asked them, well, what's the main thing that's keeping you up at night? And they said, sea level rise, South Florida, right? Miami, Fort Lauderdale. And, just use the indicators to frame, well, what about heavy precipitation? What about these heat waves? What about water shortage? A year later, sea level rise is still in their top four. It's not their first. The increase in heavy precipitation events causing more local flooding in West Palm Beach than sea level rise is vital. The increase in nighttime temperatures combined with social vulnerability is the people just can't afford the air conditioning because they have to run the air conditioning more. It just doesn't cool off at night. And now this is becoming a huge social vulnerability emphasis for West Palm Beach, the haves and have-nots, because there are a lot of people that just cannot afford to run the air conditioner enough to be able to cool that, because it's just not, you can't open the windows and cool off at night like you could before. And so these things are critical, and coming from trusted sources of information, they don't have to come from a consultant. They don't have to come from somewhere like that. They can relate to, this is the trusted source of information, and it ties into other products that Deaconess Group put out from at a glance and all, that makes us very locally relevant, that adds right to the decision space. We can give you other examples from multiple other communities here across the Southeast. But this is huge for framing the issue. What is your problem? What should your conversation be about?
I didn't come over here to plug the glider in case. I'm probably speaking for Jessica as well. But one of the limitations of being a federal agency is, although we really love to ask people how to use it, we are historically conservative and bound ethically. You can't just knock on someone's door and say, hey, we're from the government. We're here to ask you about how you use the web, right? Like that's, there's profound privacy considerations of breaking over that. So our partnerships with Fix and Collider help us get into that space a little more innovatively, threateningly, a little more ethically. So it's actually a collaboration to take this. Because we're, first of all, we're not very good at asking those questions. We don't know what to do even when we ask them. And we are bound by some privacy considerations. So we can just haul off and do surveys and polls.
And getting this information into the hands of the National Climate Assessment authors is key, because they have a much broader range to spread this information wider, and they're much better poised to be able to track where it's going from there. Yeah.
As a layperson, we talk a lot about the data and the integrity of the work and the information, but with the political climate of not wanting to even talk about climate change, maybe this has been discussed before. I don't know, I felt uncomfortable that, that it looks so great, but you know, the wording on your website or the limitations? Has that been addressed? I don't know much about it. I just know on the political level, it's not really supported. So how is this information affected by that?
So this work as part of the Sustained National Climate Assessment is actually mandated by the government. So we follow the leads set in 1990 and onwards. And we look at global change, both from human-induced perspective and from natural variability. And we use federally sourced data sets, which are deemed to be like the most integral. And then we put all our information out there. So that's why we have our metadata, we have everything transparent and really. So we're seen as a trustworthy data source.
I'd like to answer to that somewhat. The problem that we have is that much of the data foundation, which has led to the indicators, was built 75 years to 100 years ago by scientists all over the world using very technical methodologies, which almost nobody understands unless you're in the field. What the scientific community did since then is they built upon that base and they added information to it, and they showed that they could predict certain things and had very solid evidence why they're seeing the changes they're seeing. And to the scientific community, that all made sense because if you have a scientific background, you understand the basis, you understand the foundation, you know the technologies, you know the chemistry and the biology and so on that led to the conclusions that started the whole study. Translating that to people who are not scientifically based is a real problem. The point that was made over here that when you go to a community like South Florida, where people are being impacted by the results of over 100 years of data, which was built up, and by the way, these predictions were made in the 1920s that we would have global warming. Then you start to get the attention of people who don't have a scientific background. And unfortunately, the political environment can impact how they think about things or whether they want to believe or not believe what they're hearing. And if you don't have the foundation, it's very difficult to make an assessment, an objective assessment. That's something that's bothered me for decades. My first interest in this was when I was 9 years old, flying in an airplane for the first time, and I left Dayton, Ohio, and went to Chicago, and my nose was glued to the outside through the window. And I left Dayton, and it was nice and clear, Dayton, Ohio. Nice and clear, they could see everything on the ground. I got to Chicago, and it was like looking through pea soup. It was just unbelievable. And I was just distraught. 9 years old, I was distraught by that. So I've followed this field for a long time. But that's really the communication problem that you have in this field, is that the scientists understand the technology and the basis for the information, but converting that over, it depends on local understanding of the problem as it impacts the people there. Whether they understand why or not doesn't matter anymore. If you're hot at night and you can't afford the air conditioning, it's a problem.
Pretty strong. And so it's interesting. The municipalities are feeling the pain and are putting plans in place over the changes. And so this is the scale of where pains being felt in the activities taking place. And it's interesting to see those mayors taking the action and not being able to pass some of the discourses.
I think the question was related to how the
But with, let's say for the communication component, could there be pressures
Yeah.
put on your organization from the politics to down to say it, to word it? This just as a layperson, I'm not a scientist.
But, charge for the scientific
Very good.
sort of background.
And funding continues to be
You know, I think maybe the other component of what you're saying is celebrating the drug are we being effective negative? And I would say, you know, I think, you know, with the USCFP work, I'm probably when I work with it. And I work in engagement, so I can also, there's some engagement. But I think, we have the university level, you know, and this work is going to be a fun one. You know, some things are effective. This particular one, no.
The EPA haven't updated their indicators this time. Yeah, they're still involved. The other code there, they're still involved.
Well, can I just ask, like, ethical concern, possibly resource centers, how many people do you have?
So we just use USGCRP, so social media accounts.
Okay.
So we just say, hey, we have a new indicator. Someone at USGCRP tweets it. So that's something we need to work on.
And we love it.
Define yours.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, we also use.
For this particular effort, that answer will be different. But I think what you're really asking is, what's the bench strength of the comms team and social media team? Easily from support.
Yes.
It's not enough. I mean, our head of communications would argue it's not enough. And I can see that because we could certainly always do a better job of communicating all the assets and the information we have.
We leverage agency and institutional lines, so agencies and institutions that are doing work very similar to this will help participate in sharing the products and helping kind of put their agency or institution's brand on, you know, because a lot of our 13 agencies aren't out there throwing data together and making indicators, but they're doing important field work to get the instruments in place so that people in data centers can build those indicators. And so there's a good story to be told, and almost everybody is involved in this is a volunteer, and those of us who aren't volunteers are under subsidized. But it's work that the agencies have signed up to do, and it's to be done. So we don't have like a standing team.
Yeah. But if we can leverage our resources for 13 agencies, that would help.
I'm curious to know, you said that there are about 16 federal agencies involved. Is one of those the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management?
I'm not sure.
Because it's not,
Unless they're in.
they are.
Are they?
I have a recent retirement from them, and specifically, we control all the environmental, drilling, and production concerns in the Gulf of Mexico, off of Alaska, and also off the coast of California. And there is a wealth of information. I was on the financial side, but there's a wealth of environmental data that you can get off their website.
Yeah.
A ton of it.
Interior.
Interior is
It's interior. Yeah, the Macondro spill, we were originally the Minerals Management Service and had the Macondro oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, I'm sure everybody here is aware of. They decided that we didn't have good internal control, so they split Minerals Management Service, better known as Mickey Mouse Service, into the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which I'll retire from, and the Bureau of Safety Concerns. And the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has all those reports. That's just a little historical background on where we came from. And it is interior.
Yeah, Tori.
Curious, Laura, about this like next phase that you're all interested in from the indicators themselves to these more tunnel effects and the influences people and communities. Is that expertise that you currently how would you all address kind of how to move into that stage? If it's more out of the climate science realm.
Yeah, so right now our expertise is really focused on climate science.
Yeah.
So we need to broaden across our partner agencies to help with that for sure.
Right.
Spread our wings in general. I'm going to go to the National Adaptation Forum in the spring just to talk to people. Yeah, I don't know if you have any other ideas.
It's our next step. And we're almost entirely a bunch of physical scientists kind of working around figuring out how can we rigorously incorporate impacts in communities. I think we all kind of know in general what's happening. We need to have information quality at a standard measure.
Yeah.
I do have a question about your graphics. I noticed in your heat wave graphic that your dots on the map were in specific areas. Were those climate center areas? Does that mean, because it looked like a lot of the country didn't have any dots.
So it's the, let me pull it up. You can see what I'm talking about. Oh, you can see the small one right here. So it's the 50 largest US cities.
Oh, just the.
Yeah.
It's probably, I couldn't read.
Yeah, you can't read the title. That we had data for. So there, we're looking at heat waves. So there actually isn't a data point for Minnesota, Denver, and Alaska. Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, it was the 50 largest. But the great thing about having all our metadata is you can actually go in and click and you can read all that.
I'm also coming from a background of more of the physical realm. So when you start to move into things like cost number and $1 billion and things like that, I mean, if you're putting it out there, I trust that you trust that number, but that source seems different to me of estimating cost compared to like that one that's based on temperature sensor and we've been collecting data on that for 20 years. So to me, it's just fuzzier math anytime money's involved. So how does that get rolled up? How do you validate these?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is where we're sort of trepidatious moving forward because we're not experts in that, in economics or those kind of data sets. And even if we have someone who comes to us and says, oh, this would be a great indicator, like how can we trust that data without having that kind of back? So we started with $1 billion disasters because that comes from NOAA. And Deke's team creates that indicator with the economic data. And it's all it's a peer-reviewed methodology. So, yeah. But yeah.
Is